Hi guys, and welcome back to the next activity inside of our paper B exam paper for the database exam. As you can see from the screen, we're looking at the activity sheet that's provided by the exam board to us. And we can see that there are a number of headings across the top of this sheet. Test number, type of test, test data, expected results, screen prints of any tests that have happened, and then if there are any errors, how and we've resolved those errors as we've gone along. Now, the first part that's really important for us to understand is the type of test. Now, areas where students can lose easy marks are misunderstanding the type of tests and what they mean. As you can see at the very top of this document, there is a key that relates to what the type of tests mean. You can see that N represents normal, R equals erroneous, and X equals extreme. Now, it's very important we understand what these are and how they work. Normal data, when it's input into a system, is just the normal data that you'd expect to be put into the system that's correct. So things like first names, last names, and any telephone numbers. Then we come on to the erroneous test. Now, erroneous tests are where we input data or information that's incorrect knowingly. And that will be to test any validation rules or any principles or properties that we've placed inside of our fields to make sure that no one can misinput information into our database. So we're going to be testing some of those validation rules with erroneous data. When we look at the extreme tests on a test plan, we're going to be looking at how we can test the validation rules of any fields that we have on our database. If we have a database field that allows input of a data that ranges between 1 and 10, when we do an extreme test, we're going to be testing the boundaries of those ranges, so 1 and 10. And that will be just to make sure that we can input the values at the uppermost limits and the lowermost limits. So over the course of the next video, we're going to be looking at the types of tests that we're going to need to put into our database tables based on criteria that's provided to us. So in activity 7, we are provided with a basis of tests that must be carried out. These are, number 1, the user cannot select an invalid job role on the input form that adds a member of staff. 2, the user cannot select invalid availabilities on the input form that adds a member of staff. 3, a record will not save in the staff table without the staff member's forename. 4, a record will save in the staff table if the staff member's details are present and valid. 5, the correct list of staff members displays when the job role is bartender and the availability is Friday. 6, the correct total of staff displays when the job role steward and the availability is Saturday. We are going to use this test plan to check our databases against the criteria that's been provided to us by the exam board. So we're going to start off with the first activity, which is looking at whether a user can select an invalid job role. So let's open the database and make sure that we've got the right form open. As you can see here, I have our add new staff member form open, and we're going to put some information into this form to see if it works properly. The question asks us, the user cannot select an invalid job role on the input form that adds a member of staff. So let's put some test data in. So I'm going to be entering in a surname of tester, the forename of James. I'm going to choose the availability for Saturday, and then I'm going to try and type in some random information. So it could be that I'm a tester, and then choose to save. And what should happen is our validation rules should stop us from being able to enter this data into our database. So if I click save, we now get an alert box that says that the text we've entered isn't in the list, and I need to select an item from the list or enter the text that matches one of the list's items. So if I click OK, I can now get that pop up. Now that should be sufficient information for us to take a screenshot and place it inside of our database test table. So in order for us to do that, we can do Windows Shift and S, and that will allow us to select a specific area on our screen and then select what we want. So I'm going to select all of the area of my form, including the little pop-up box, and I'm then going to paste that into my test plan to show the evidence to the examiner. So I'll simply open up my Word document and make it bigger, and then I'm going to put the information in here and then paste. Now, it's well worth remembering when we do our test data, you need to be very specific as to the data that you're putting into your database. So not just the fact that you're going to choose the wrong job role, you need to make sure you put all of the data that you're going to be inputting into the form. So the things like the staff surname, you need to make sure that you're putting what you are putting into the actual database itself. And the same for the staff first name or forename. Their availability. And then finally, the job role. And this is where we need to be very, very clear that we're going to be putting some incorrect information in. And that's going to be that they're going to be a tester. Now, as we mentioned earlier on, we have to make sure that we're choosing the right type of test for this test. Now, we're putting incorrect information in, so we know that this is wrong information. It's not going to be normal and it's not extreme, so therefore it's going to be erroneous. We need to make sure that we're putting R for erroneous in here and make sure that we put in the test number 1. In our expected results, we're going to put in some information to suggest to the examiner that upon the user clicking save record, a alert box is displayed to the user to inform them of the requirement to use the values in the list box. We don't need to put anything in this final area here because there are no errors, and that is our first question done. So now we're looking at question number 2, where we're going to be looking at how we can make it that the user cannot select an invalid availability on the input form that adds a member of staff. So in order for us to do that, we're going to need to make sure that we put the first parts of our test into the test plan. So as you can see on the screen here, we've got our test plan. We're going to add a number 2. And we're going to be testing using some test data. So let's put in what test data we would like to put in to our database. So similarly as we did in test number 1, we're going to need to make sure that we put in staff surname. Remember, this is another test, so we can give it another random piece of information. So this could be other staff forename of Anne. And this time around, we're going to put in something for the availability. And the availability, we're going to be putting Tuesday. We know that this is a value that is not in our list, and it shouldn't be allowed to be entered in, so we can put that into our test plan. And then the job role we're going to choose will be bartender. So our expected results are the input form will not allow the entry of the data, and an alert box will be displayed to the user to inform them of the requirement to select a value from the drop-down or from the list box. So now that we've put our information in there, this is obviously where we type in what type of test we're going to be using. This is going to be an erroneous test because we're putting in knowingly incorrect data. So this needs to be R for erroneous. Okay guys, so now that we've got our test data inside of our test plan, we're going to just make sure that everything's right inside of our test data. And I can see there that I've mistyped bartender for the job role, so I'm just going to change that. Make sure that if you have got any issues with the way that you type stuff, that you resolve them, because you could lose points inside of your exam for this. So now that we've got all the data that we want to input into our form, we're going to go into Access and we're going to enter in this information. So if we tab over, we can see that we've got our add new staff member form ready for us, and we're going to go in and add our new staff member of other, and we're going to choose the job role first to be bartender, and then we're going to put in an invalid availability, and we're going to put in the Tuesday that we said we was going to do inside of our test plan. And what should happen as soon as we navigate away from this, if we tab, we should get an error. And our error message shows that we need to please enter a valid availability such as Friday, Saturday, or both days. So what we need to do is we need to hold down Windows, Shift and S key to do a snap or a screenshot, and we're going to select the area of our form including the dialog box so that we can paste this inside of our test, so that we can show the examiners the evidence of our forms working properly. So I'm just going to tab back to my Word document. I'm going to go inside of the screen print area. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste in the screenshot of the dialog box that's been displayed because we have entered in an invalid availability. That should give us the points and the marks for this part of the question 2. Now we're going to move on to the third of our tests, where we're required to have a record that does not save to the staff table without a staff member's full name being present. So we're going to add that information into our test plan first by simply clicking on the test number, adding it as number 3. We're going to talk about the test data that we're going to put in again. I would in this instance copy and paste from our previous test and paste that in there, because this data is going to be quite valid because it actually didn't save last time because of the issue we had with our invalid availability. And we could put in our expected results of a dialog box will prompt the user to include a staff member's first name or forename if missing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump back into our database and pick up where we were from our previous test. And this time we're just going to change the availability to a valid day. So let's put it as Friday. And then we're going to get rid of Anne. and we're going to click on save. Now notice here that it's saying the record has been saved, so that means that our test has worked because it's showing us that something has happened that we shouldn't have expected to have happened. So if I click on OK on that one, and we're going to go into this form and we're going to look at why the message is not being displayed. So we go up to the view, and we're going to go to the design view, and we're going to look at the validation rules that we've got applied to that text box area. Now if we look at forename, you'll notice that there is no validation rule nor validation text. We put that the staff surname is required, but also we need to make sure that we've got the first name required. So as we've done it in our previous text box, we could quite simply look at this as a reference and guide ourselves to how we go about making it so that there is a validation rule applied to the forename. So we can see here the validation rule is asking that it is not null. So this must be a value. It cannot be a null value. And if it is, we're going to display, please enter a valid surname to the user so that they're aware of the issue. So let's click on the forename, and we're quite simply just going to do exactly as we did with the previous text box. So we're going to type in is not null, and then we're going to put in a little prompt to say, please enter a staff forename. We're going to click on the view, and what we should have done, which I didn't do, is we should have taken a screenshot to show that the issue was still there. So what I'm going to do, just to save a bit of time, I'm going to screenshot, hopefully this working now. So if I click save, oh, so it hasn't done that because it's not updated. So let's just take a screenshot of that now to show that this is the error that we achieved. And let's go back into our test plan and paste that in. And what we're going to do is over here, we do have this extra column, remember, that says only complete this column if the results are not as expected, which they're not. Explain the error. If you correct the error, explain how you have done that, including screen prints. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside here, and we're going to say that the staff forename had no validation rule or text applied this has now been added to ask the user to include a forename if it was missing using an alert. So let's just go back to our database and let's make sure that we are testing this out. So let's put in and again. That's saved. Let's try it without. And you can see here we got our little alert box to say, please enter a staff forename. I'm going to simply again, Windows Shift and S, select from my screenshot here, go back to my test plan, and I'm going to paste it. You may need to have to do a little bit of higgery-jiggery with your screenshots, but it fit in there quite nicely for me. And that's test number 3 done. The next test we're going to look at is test 4, where we have to have a record we'll save in the staff table if the staff member's details are present and valid. Well, that should be quite straightforward. So let's go back to our test plan, and we're going to put in our 4th test. Now I've just noticed that we didn't choose the test type that our test number 3 was. This should be normal. And I've also noticed I haven't updated the forename to be null. If we put null in there, that will give an indication to the examiner that that is blank. If you want to be very explicit, put in brackets blank. So let's move back to our test number 4, and where it's asking us that a record will save in the staff table if the staff member's details are present and valid. So we're going to go back into our database. We're going to go to the screenshot, and we're going to add in Anne, and we're going to click save. And we're going to make sure that we've got your record has been saved prompt box here, and we're just going to do Windows Shift and S again. Just take a screenshot because that's showing that our record has been saved successfully with valid data inside of the availability, the job role, and all of the other areas. And then we're going to click OK. And we're just going to go back to our test document. We're going to paste that into our pictures whilst we're doing it. I may be doing things slightly different to how we did it before, but we'll get to the same result we need. We're going to copy the test data here, and we're going to paste it in down here. We're going to make sure that we've got Anne's name in there. We know that the availability was chosen was Friday. Again, I've just noticed a little error I've got up here. Availability should be Friday. As I said earlier on, just make sure when you're doing your test plans that each one of these is done right. So this is where I'm sure your tutors will have told you, check and check again anything you've done, just to make sure that you've not forgotten or slipped up. So I can say that my staff, that surname is other, my forename is Anne, the availability is Friday, which is valid, job role is bartender. So in my expected results, I'm going to put an alert is displayed to the user to inform them that the record was saved correctly. And we're just going to make sure that we've added the test type to our test plan for test number 4. And as we're entering information that's valid, and there's no omissions, and there is no extreme data being placed, this one would naturally be a normal test. So we'll put in an N for this instance here. We're now going to move on to the 5th test, where we're asked to make sure that the correct list of staff members are displayed when the job role is bartender and the availability is Friday. So what we're going to do, as with 4, we're going to move down to our test plan. We're going to put in test number 5. We're going to be using a normal test in this instance, as we're just testing to see if things work. And we are going to be putting in our test data that simply extrapolating information out of the actual question itself. So we need to put the job role as being bartender, and the availability being Friday. This is quite simple, this one. So make sure if you're seen or shown something in a test that's asking you to display something where something is and something is another thing, that you put that as your test data selection. So what we're hoping for is when we do our tests, we're hoping that the data that is displayed shows the following staff. members and counts them. So in here we need to be very clear on what records should be being displayed to the user once they have selected those job roles and that availability. So we need to make sure that we're listing the correct expected outputs. So when you are in the exam, check what you, from the tables, look in the tables themselves to see what job roles are on Friday, or what staff members are on a Friday, or a bartender, or whatever the scenario is, and then put what you're expecting in terms of the output from your form when you do run it, if you do have this sort of question. So in here, we're going to jump into the Access database, and we're going to open up our form which looks for the availability and the job type. So I'm going to click on the availability, which we asked for Friday, and we're looking at the job type, which is bartender, and then our records should show up down here. So we can see that there is 4 members of staff and that these are the staff members. We can cycle through them using the next record options here, or using the scroller here. Just click through, just make sure. You can see here, obviously I've been playing around with some of the data that I'm expecting to see, and yeah, that should be fine. Just to confirm that, we can open up our tables, we can look at the staff. So here are the records that we're expecting to see. So if we go back into our test plan, we're going to list the expected output. So we've got an other, flick back again, Joe Blogs, back again, our random person with no surname but forename of DSD. You won't have anything like DSD in your table if you play around with it. And the first is Alex Goodson. And then I'm just going to put in a total of 4 staff available. And I'm going to put my screenshot in here. Again, Windows Shift and S, selecting our form. Should be able to see there, so that the examiner can see, even though they can't quite see all of the users, they can see that there is a record there, and that they can see the 4 of them listed. They can see that you've got it there, the total number of staff, and that confirms that for them. So that's question number 5. If we now move on to question number 6, it's very similar to question number 5, where we're asked to show the correct total number of staff displayed when the job role is steward and the availability is Saturday. So in here, I'm just going to copy and paste my data set here. This time it's going to be steward, and we're going to have Saturday, and we are expecting a number. What's our number? If we look at the staff number again, it's going to be, if we go to our database, Saturday, steward, we can see that there is only 1 record there, so we're just going to have 1, and we're going to have the data displayed should only show 1 record for, and then we just put his name, Andrew Brown. Now I know I'm doing this back to front a little bit, because what I really should be doing is looking at the tables inside of our database and saying, okay, well, let's look inside our tables. Database, we know that we're looking for stewards, so let's look at the job roles, and we can look at all of the stewards in our table for staff. We're going to click on there and we can see that yes, there are stewards of this list, but what we also want to do is want to see what their availability is, so that we know that Andrew should be available on day 1, so he should only be available on Saturday, and nobody else is available here other than Andrew. So we know that that's what should be displayed in our form, and as we know, because we've just run our form, it is quite clearly correct. So I'm going to show a screenshot of that again. Windows Shift and S, select the form, and then I'm going to go back into my test table. I'm going to right click and paste, and then that should be okay. And that should hopefully, once we put in the type of test in here, so that's going to be another normal test, that should be our tests completed for this activity part B. As you can see, there are some quite straightforward tests in the end of our test plan. Something I would sort of want to highlight to you all is to make sure that when you're doing the test data, these are areas where you can really fall down if you don't put in the correct amount of information inside here. Okay, try and be as detailed as you can in terms of the expected results. All right, and if things do go wrong, as you've seen from my experience down here, make notes of it, make comments to it, because it might be that you've forgotten something or you didn't do something. So therefore, you know what to do. You can then amend it and show that, and that will get you your mark. So that is your tests done for activity 7 of your of your exam for paper part B. The next part will be looking at your evaluation, and that is very subjective to you, and you will have to explain how and why you have done what is expected of you inside of your databases.